Welcome back to the podcast for Cultural Reformation, brought to you by the Ezra Institute.
Well, welcome back, one and all. This is the podcast for Cultural Reformation, brought to you by the Ezra Institute. I'm Ryan Aris, and today it is my pleasure to have Pastor Tobias Riemenschneider as our special guest. We'll get more into Pastor Tobias in just a few moments. I just want to remind you once more that the Worldview Leadership Academy is happening in the USA this year. That's in Huntsville, Alabama, July 30th through August 4th, and scholarships are available. There's funding available both to attend the program as well as a academic partnership that the Ezra Institute has with Bryan College. So if you attend the Worldview Leadership Academy, you can apply that time spent towards course credit at Bryan College in Dayton, Tennessee. Visit EzraInstitute.com, EzraPress.com, and you can find out more about that opportunity. Also, as I've mentioned before, but several people have still been asking, our American donation system is now online. So American friends and supporters have been asking for a way to support the work of the Institute in the USA. If you visit EzraInstitute.com, click on the donate button, you'll see that it's separated by country now, in USA, Canada, and the UK, and that American donation platform is online and available now. Thanks very much for all of your support. It helps us to carry on with content like this. We really appreciate it. God bless you. So that's all of our announcements for today. I want to jump right into to this interview. And as I mentioned, Tobias Riemenschneider is our special guest. Pastor, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, brother.
Oh, it's a real joy. For those of you who don't know Pastor Tobias, you will. He's pastor of Evangelical Reformed Baptist Church in Frankfurt, Germany. And he is one of the principal authors of the Frankfurt Declaration of Christian and Civil Liberties, which has, at least on the website as of today, I'm sure it's gone up since then, but 6,200 and more signatories. And that is pastors, ministry leaders, heads of school, business leaders, lay people from dozens and dozens of countries in Europe, North America, Africa, Australia, and we're going to be talking about that declaration as well. Tobias is also the author of Resisting Tyranny: A Christian Response to Government Overreach. This is the book right here, and if you've got the title, we've published it here at Ezra Press in English. You've got it also published in German, and that's available in your preferred language. So that's a real treat. Brother, thanks again for being here. It's great to see you.
Yes, thank you so much. And this is the German version.
Yes,
so if someone
perfect.
from Germany is listening, you can also have it in German.
Wonderful. We'll put links to where to get both of those versions in the notes. So, Tobias, I wanted to start by having you say more about the Frankfurt Declaration, and this is available online, frankfurtdeclaration.com, and it is 5 statements, 5 sets of affirmations and denials, loaded with scriptural proofs to support each statement, and they all revolve around and concern the recent, or I guess were catalyzed by, is a better way to put it, the recent COVID moment and the response of governments around the world to tend totalitarian. Maybe just to start us off by telling us what was the moment that you realized that as a pastor, as someone concerned with the care of eternal souls, when did you realize it was important to release a public statement like this?
So I basically realized right from the beginning that something was off. So I think it was March 2020 when in Germany the first lockdown came, and probably it was the same all around the world, basically. And this lockdown, during this lockdown, all worship services were prohibited. And I knew right from the start that I would not submit because I knew we need to worship our God.
Mm-hmm.
And we cannot have the state decide whether we are allowed to give worship to God or not. So I knew right from the start that we cannot submit to everything the state is wanting us to do or not to do. But I was not thinking of any statement at all. The first statement we issued in Germany was approximately 1 year later as a response to a statement put out by about 50 quite well-known pastors, Bible teachers, and so on from Germany and Switzerland. They had released a statement basically calling all Christians to submit to basically whatever the state demands them to submit to. And we thought, okay, someone has to say something against it. And we didn't really want to do it. That is my co-pastor Peter and I, we didn't really aspire to do something publicly. On the contrary, we were quite happy that if no one would have noticed us, we could just silently disobey, and resist the state. But no one was doing anything. So we thought, okay, it's up to us. We have to do something. So that was our first statement, which we published in Germany. This is, by the way, also part of this book, Resisting Tyranny. And then around the same time, I think, I was approached from a brother from the UK, from England. And he was gathering a group of people, pastors, theologians, basically from around the world. From the UK, from mainland Europe, from Africa, and Canada. And he brought us all together, and his idea was to have a global declaration with regard to COVID, with regard to the government overreach. And so it was his idea, and we started meeting on Zoom, I guess, and started to work on this. And it became clear after a while that not everyone was going in the same direction. So a small group basically split off, and that was three brothers: Pastor Paul Hartwig from South Africa, Pastor Stephen Lloyd from France, and myself. And the three of us, the small group, then worked out this Frankfurt Declaration together.
Right. One of the things that is striking about the Declaration is that it's there in the headline, civil Christian and civil liberties, but it doesn't begin with a sort of insistence upon the rights of man. It goes further back. It's dealing with with Article 1 really focuses on the nature of reality. It's an answer to the fundamental worldview questions. Questions like, where are we? Who's in charge here? What do I have to do? And it seems like a large part of the conflict, a lot of the reasons that this statement was necessitated, why you felt that we have to do something, is because that our states, our government, our civil authorities were not acknowledging these starting points.
Yes. So the first article is about God being the creator and being the lawgiver and being the judge of all men, even those in authority. And of course, he's the highest lawgiver. So and we found that this was the foundation. We believe that there is a God, that there is a higher power, higher than the state, and his laws are more important than the laws of the state. And The state may judge us here on earth, but God will judge us eternally. So this is basically the foundation. Why do we have a problem submitting to the state in everything? Well, because there is a higher authority and a higher law and a higher judge. And if and when the authorities here on earth do anything, demand anything, prohibit anything which is against the law of God, then we have to obey God more than men. So this was basically the starting point to explain why we as Christians cannot just submit to anything and everything the state says, but why we have to resist at times, because there's this higher authority.
Right. Now, we mentioned already 6,000 or more signatories, several dozen initial signatories who had sort of received the draft statement and signed on and offered some input. I believe that the Ezra Institute's Joe Boot was one of those.
Yes.
Were you expecting this sort of response, or what did you hope to or expect to accomplish with the statement?
Yeah. So to be honest, we didn't know what to expect or what to accomplish. I thought it was important to have something out there. I mean, we are not the only ones, right? Others also put something out, but we thought to have an international approach to this would be helpful. We had no idea how this would, what effect this would have, how that would be received. I was very surprised and very encouraged when I sent the draft statement to Brother X and Pastor Y and almost everyone, with one or two exceptions only, almost everyone responded, "I want to sign." That was a great surprise. I'd never expected that. I'm a personal friend of Dr. James White, so I was hoping that because we are friends, he would probably sign it, but I didn't expect it to have the effect it had. So and that's basically also, we didn't do it very professionally. I hope the statement is done professionally, but the entire process, when I think of how normally those statements are put together, then this is a huge process. People come together maybe for a whole day or even more, and to finalize everything. And we didn't. It was just us three guys on Zoom drafting this declaration, and then basically sending it to people and waiting for the response. So it was not done very professionally in this way, but God blessed it, and we are very grateful, and we are very surprised how God used this declaration. Even men, where people told me, I will try to send it to him, but it's basically impossible he will sign it, and he did. So there were some brothers, some pastors who are very men like John MacArthur, men like Voddy Borkham, and many others. I would never have expected these men to sign the declaration, and I'm very grateful they did.
Well, praise God for that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to ask you a little bit more about the book, Resisting Tyranny.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I guess is common to the declaration as well as the book, is the response that you've already alluded to, where it was common for during throughout the COVID measures around the world, for many churches and many Christians to endorse a position that it was effectively summed up as love your neighbor by wearing a mask, or love your neighbor by getting vaccinated, or something like that. And it was a position that carried the assumption that this moment that we are in, these current state measures, are no big deal. They're inconvenient. We would rather not, if we had all things being equal, but it's not a big deal. Historically, there have been worse offenses against personal freedom, and that the Christ-like thing to do was to give up our civil liberties. But I'd just like to hear from you why you took a strong line rejecting that sort of reasoning and those sorts of conclusions.
Yeah, in Germany, the Lutheran State Church even had this slogan, "Vaccinate your neighbor as yourself." So there was very little resistance, at least visible resistance. I know there have been some churches who silently and just disobeyed, but most kept silent. And those who were loud, they promoted everything basically, yeah. And I know that people said, this is not the fight to fight. So this is not where we resist. If it gets much worse, then we will resist. Well, and some of them said that at the beginning, and then it got much worse, and they still didn't resist. So I'm not sure if that's really, yeah. So what I saw was not just an inconvenience, but it was a major attack on God, on His image bearers. So men are made in the image of God, and that means that we have certain unalienable rights. You cannot just treat us like a dog. We are made in the image of God. We have dignity. We have rights. You cannot take them away. And this was an attack on the image of God. Especially in the worst, the worst things that really happen. It's not just that you are required to wear a mask. I wore a mask when I was in the supermarket, so that's not my biggest issue. Even though I think it is an injustice, but I don't think that's the biggest issue. But how many people died alone in the hospitals, and the daughter was not allowed to visit the dying mother and hold her hand when she died. Children were treated basically like rats, like those who, at least in Germany, this was the narrative. They spread the disease, and horrible things were done to these children. I don't know if they will ever recover from this, right? To have all this fear. In Germany, there was even an official government paper that said you have to tell the children that they will be responsible if grandma and grandpa die. So it was so evil what was done, especially to those who are the most vulnerable, the old, the dying, the children. So this was the main issue. And of course, the other main issue was the worship of God Himself. So it was not just about man. It was not just about our dignity, our freedom, our being made in the image of God. It was also about the honor of God. Singing was prohibited in Germany for 7 months. You cannot just stop singing praises to the Lord, to the maker of the universe, to your sustainer. You cannot just stop giving what He demands of you. So I don't think those were just minor inconveniences. I believe that was a massive attack. And I'm not saying there haven't been similar attacks in the past or bigger attacks in the past. But during our lifetime, this was probably the biggest attack we witnessed. And so I think it actually was the duty of every Christian to stand up and say no. Because I fear that if you did not stand up during COVID, I'm not very confident that you will if it gets even worse. Right. I was reminded of Daniel. When Daniel came to, it was in exile, he made the decision right at the beginning, in his heart, I will not do anything which is against the law of God. And because he began with this, I believe he was able later to have been thrown in the lion's den. Yeah, so I think courage doesn't come someone later. You have to train. I think this was a good training to see whether you actually are courageous if you are able to stand up against injustice by the grace of God alone. I'm not saying I was very afraid. It was not in my own strength. I was very afraid, but God helped me, and He made me strong, and yeah.
Right. Well, thank God for that.
Yes.
You in the book, you speak well, you speak graciously, but one thing that a reader can't escape is that you're speaking very very directly against or towards state officials specifically, as well as to pastors and churches and others who have urged compliance above all other virtues. Speak pastorally and with regards to the worship of God, as you've mentioned already. What is at risk spiritually for the church or for the individual Christian who made compliance the highest virtue?
Yeah. So, my main concern, maybe starting with this, my main concern was not to protect the state officials or to protect the pastors who complied, because I believe that that they are the ones who are guilty, and my main concern was not to protect them, to protect their honor or so. My main concern was for the sheep who suffered under these men. I cried for them, and that was the motivation to basically write the entire book. Everything, what the motivation was to help my brothers and sisters who are suffering under tyranny, whether it was by state officials or whether it was in the church by pastors who wouldn't allow them to worship anymore unless they wear a mask, who would throw them out of the church. I have heard so many testimonies, spoken to so many people who suffered great injustice, even under their own pastors. That the pastors, they are there to protect the sheep. When danger comes, when the wolves come, then you have to stand up and be even willing to risk your own life. And people in Canada have done so. James Coates, Tim Stevens, they went to jail because they wanted to protect their sheep against all costs. Others were charged, like Jacob Reaume and others, they were charged with enormous amounts. But those are the men I respect as shepherds. They stand up when they are willing to suffer in order to protect their sheep. And that was also my heart. It went out to the sheep. I wanted to help them. So that's why I spoke directly, because it wasn't my intention to protect those who did the injustice. It was to protect those and help those who suffered under the injustice. So, and I believe it is so much at stake. We currently live in a time, you might have noticed, where basically God, His law, His truth, and therefore also His people, if they want to be truthful, faithful, are under a major attack. We don't even know anymore whether there is a God or whether there's men and women. So this is a massive attack on the foundations of truth, the foundations of Christendom. God Himself is attacked and His image bearers. So everything is at stake right now. And if the church begins to comply, when the state sees, when the state realizes, okay, I only need a narrative which is very threatening, and people just believe me. Well, that's great. And then when they are afraid that they might even die, then I can just demand anything, and they will comply. So how do you know that the state, and we live in a godless state? I think so much is obviously this is a godless state, an anti-Christian state, murdering so many babies, the entire homosexuality, transgender stuff, and so on. It's obvious. So why would you believe that if the church backs down and does it again, would you believe that the state would just stop and say, okay, here are your freedoms back? Thanks to God, it happened after COVID ended. At least I hope it has, and we got most of our freedoms back. But who knows what will happen in 2 or 3 years? Maybe there's another virus. Maybe there's something else. So to stand the ground now against all the satanic lies, against tyranny, against an anti-Christian state who produces so much suffering. I just mentioned the old people who died alone. I mentioned the children who suffered so much. We have to stand up. Actually, I believe that it even got that worse is at least partly, maybe wholly, entirely, the fault of the church. Because for the last decades, I don't know how many years, maybe 100 years, I don't know, at least the last decades, the church was basically asleep. All these things happened. Abortion got legalized, and homosexuality got legalized, and transgenderism came, and all these things came. It started with feminism. So you could go back decades and decades, probably 100 years or even more. And the church didn't really stand up against it, didn't really resist. They just let it happen. And now that's where we are. So I believe this is really a wake-up call. COVID was a wake-up call. It was for me to understand, okay, this is really a fight to the death. So they are not neutral. The state isn't neutral. They don't just respect Christians and say, well, if you want to worship, that's fine. No, that was an illusion. Neutrality was an illusion. They are not neutral. They are opposed to God and everything which belongs to God. So, and we have to understand that. We have to wake up and we have to join the fight and resist where we have to resist.
Right, and we heard that too. We had anecdotes here in Canada that people in business, people in education, people in other spheres had been saying, well, we're waiting for the church to do something or to say something. Why are we not hearing from the church as these freedoms are encroached upon?
Right. The same in Germany. We had atheists who called out for the church. Why are you not saying anything? So
yes,
I mean, I don't really accept. I don't really accept critiques from atheists, but
right.
They were right. So yeah. So the church just proved that not the entire church. There was resistance, but great parts of the church just proved that they are completely in step with the anti-Christian state. That they just have been overcome, and that's not good. They have to wake up.
That's right. Right. So you wrote the book, as you mentioned, as a wake-up call. You wrote it out of a primary concern for the people who were suffering within and without the church. Yeah. But I guess what now? Now that according to all the official channels, now that COVID is over, what do you hope to accomplish with this book, or what do you hope? Who is it for? Now that people are able, by and large, to get the fellowship, the community, the direct pastoral care that they have been missing.
Yeah. So maybe a brief word regarding the book. So the book is a compilation of statements, sermons, articles, and so on. I wrote during the time of COVID. And even though some were written with regard to a German, the German background, I believe and hope that they are valid globally, because I've tried very much to argue exclusively on biblical grounds. And the truth of the Bible, they don't only apply to Germany, and they don't only apply to a specific time. They apply universally.
Right. Yeah.
And you're right. It seems that COVID is mostly over. I mean, just a few days ago, I wanted to be at a conference in Texas. I wasn't allowed to fly to Texas because
right?
they still required vaccination. They abolished that a few days ago, but it was in 3 weeks ago or so. I was still not allowed to travel to Texas, and I just read that there is a Giro d'Italia, which is a some bicycle race in Italy, and they brought back the mask requirements. So I'm not sure if it's really over. I hope so, but it doesn't really matter because, as I already mentioned, we have to realize that we live in a state that is not neutral towards God, not neutral to his people, but it is an anti-Christian state, a murderous state, a state that hates God and loves death. And so to believe that COVID was just completely unique and nothing like that will ever come again, I think that's naive.
Right.
I mean, I would be grateful if something like that don't come again, but I believe it will. I actually believe it's already here. In Germany, more and more Christians really struggle in their jobs, sometimes even lose their jobs because of transgenderism. So the issue of the state, overreach, of the state trying to force everyone, including Christians, to acknowledge their ideology, their religion, it's still there. They call good evil and evil good, and they demand that you do so also. So this problem of the state not being neutral but being anti-Christian and trying to impose its worldview, its religion, its ideologies on everyone, including us Christians, this situation is still there, and I believe it will get worse. And who knows whether there will be another situation like COVID, or maybe even worse. So that's why I believe that it is important to learn to think biblically about this entire topic of the relationship between state and church and family and the individual and Christ, the Lord over all. So it's important to have a clear biblical understanding how these relate to each other. It is important to have a clear biblical understanding where are the limits of subordination, because we are called to obey the state, but I strongly believe that the Bible also gives us the limits of this command to obey and to submit. So it is really important to understand these things so that we know when to submit and when to stand up and resist the state. And I believe, as I said, we live in a time where this is extremely important to think about and to know when it's the right time to obey God rather than men.
Right. What about? So you've spoken of a godly criteria for resisting, where that's a Christian option or even a Christian responsibility or duty. What about efforts to influence or to change official state policy to become more in line with a scriptural understanding? Is there where does that effort fit in these the relationship of these spheres?
Yes. So I believe that this is extremely important. That's why I said the church has to wake up. We have to realize that we were asleep for decades, and that all the evil stuff we are now seeing there, it happened, at least in part, because we didn't do anything against it. People tend, Christians, many at least, and I think it's also an issue of theology and an issue of eschatology, probably. Many believe, well, okay, this is the world, and the world is evil. So what should I do? Well, maybe just turn inwardly, and
Right.
and just focus on my church or something like that. The problem is, if you do that, then the world outside there gets more and more evil, and it comes the time when it's so evil that it doesn't, that it comes and encroaches on your church. So you will even lose what you wanted to keep. You wanted to focus on your church, and so no, the state will come and take it away from you. So this is a war. This is warfare. and we have to join the war. We cannot just sit there and wait until we lost the war, right? So that's why I believe it is very important not to get these things straight for ourselves or maybe for our family or our church, but to understand that we have to be actively involved, that we basically have to fulfill the Great Commission, to go out there and tell people that there is a new king. Well, he has been there for 2,000 years, but there is a
Yes.
king, and every one of you has to obey him. Yeah, you have to be his disciples. You have to bow your knees before him. Your tongue has to confess that he is Lord and not you, and you have to learn to obey everything he teaches. So, of course, this is primarily for those who believe, for the believers. But our call, our Great Commission, is to go out there and make everyone a believer, if possible, if God wills. So we should disciple the nations, and that's what we have to do. We have to declare that that there is a king that was installed by God, and his name is Jesus, and he now commands you to obey him, to believe in him and to obey him, because he will come again one day and he will judge you according to his law, and not according to your law, and not according to your morals, but to his. And it is extremely important to do that. That is the only way, by proclaiming the truth, by proclaiming the word, and not just the idea, okay, the gospel is only Christ and him crucified. That is true. That is the core of the gospel, but that's not the entire gospel, because Christ is also risen, and Christ is also seated on the throne, and Christ now has commandments for everyone, and he will come back and judge. And so we have to proclaim the word. We have to tell people that they will meet their maker, and that they will be held responsible for what they do. We have to call them to obey God again. I think that's also what we see in Scripture. Not just in the Old Testament, not just in Israel, but also we see it in the New Testament. We see it with Paul speaking to Roman leaders and so on. And I believe that's important. We have to do it. And especially, to be honest, I cannot even fathom how we can just sit there knowing that while we sit here, thousands of babies are murdered. How can the church be silent? I mean, this is so obvious that we have to do something. We are called to protect the weak. We are called to protect those who are being led to be slaughtered. So if that doesn't wake you up and make you understand that you have to do something, that you have to go out there and proclaim the word and proclaim that this is wrong, and that God will judge all the blood of all these babies, you don't get Christianity right.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate what you said. You mentioned just in passing eschatology, and I think that that's actually, it's an important consideration. Not that we demand uniformity in eschatology in our position, but the assumption that I believe that we're working from is that this is a long and extended in the history of the world. Christ's kingdom advances, sometimes more visibly, sometimes less visibly. And if I can put my own interpretation on the role and position and nature of the book that you've written, there is a time that we are in right now to play defense, to stand and say, and hedge around the historic liberties that we've won thanks to the role and the advance of the gospel. Yes. There is a time to advance. There is a time to push forward. There is a time to play defense, and that's a time that we have been in, especially over the last couple of years with COVID. If that's fair of me to say.
Yeah, I would just add, I believe the best way to play defense is to attack. So there's even a saying, there is a German saying in German, attack is the best defense. So I think we have to understand that we have the truth and that we come in the name of the Lord. And the state, this secular, humanist, anti-Christian state it might be a giant, it might be a real Goliath, and we might just be a small David, but we come in the name of the Lord, and we will not accept that that the armies of the Lord will be mocked, by Goliath. So, and I believe eschatology plays a role. I believe that a special, I believe that there is the potential, at least, that if you have a theology, an eschatology, that everything will get worse and worse anyways. You cannot do anything about it, and the best thing is to to wait for the rapture, which will probably happen on Tuesday.
Right.
I don't believe that's that the best eschatology, which can enable you and encourage you to go out there and fulfill basically the Great Commission. And it doesn't have to, obviously, because John MacArthur is a great example. He stood up and he fought. But I think you can do so more consistently if you have an eschatology that also fits this idea that the gospel will advance and the church has to do something, and there is a hope of success, not just eternally, but even here on this earth. And I believe if you look back at history, that's what history proves. If you look back at Germany 500 years ago, it was really dark in Germany, and then there was one monk, and he stood up against a giant, against the Roman Catholic Church and the state, and God helped him, and light after darkness. So I believe that can happen again, and this eschatology will help you to be courageous and go out there and make it happen if God wills.
Amen. Thank you so much, Pastor Tobias. That's been an excellent conversation. Is there anything that you'd like to leave with our listeners before we sign off today?
Well, I want to express my gratitude that you and Ezra Press were willing to publish my book in English. I'm not sure, I haven't done any research on this, but I'm not aware that this happens very often, that a book from a German pastor is translated into English and published in English. So I'm very grateful for that, and I hope that people will be encouraged to buy it and read it. Even though it's from a German context, I believe it will be helpful. And so may God bless you and your work. And thank you for everything, brother.
Well, we have a lot of the works of this guy named Martin Luther in English, but I'm not sure.
That's
I'm
true.
not sure who.
Maybe I should have said I'm not aware. Maybe in the last 50 years or so, the last 500 years. You're right. There have been a few guys.
We've got a little bit, but
yes,
it was a real privilege for us and for me to work to bring this book out, and I'm trusting, I'm confident that it'll be a blessing to many people. Tobias, thank you so much for being with us today. God bless you in all of your work. And again, the book is Resisting Tyranny, A Christian Response to Government Overreach. I had to remind myself of the subtitle. Sorry about that. That's available at ezrapress.com and most other places online where you can buy books. Pastor, God bless you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, brother. God bless.
I remind all of our listeners, as always, that from him and through him and to him are all things. May Jesus Christ, the King of the earth, be glorified. We'll look forward to being with you again next week.